Good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Pulse, live from the World Economic Forum here in Davos, where President Trump says he will hold talks over Greenland after threatening new tariffs on European countries getting in his way. France has pushed back most forcefully. Donald Trump has threatened 200% tariffs on champagne after President Macron declined a seat on the board of Peace for Gaza. If that wasn't enough, there's a global bond sell-off with Japanese yields hitting a record on concern over plans to cut food taxes. So the French president, among some of the speakers here in Davos, will be hearing from the UK Chancellor, China's Vice Premier, the chief executives of the New York Stock Exchange, and Anthropic this week as well. We also have some great guests coming up on the program, including Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group, the Nigerian finance minister, and then chief executives of pharma giants Merck and Novartis. First thing is first, though, we're seeing a sell-off in equities. So let's get to the markets. A sell-off in equities that seem to be extending the standoff between the U.S. and Europe over control of Greenland. We saw also a meltdown in Japanese long-term bonds with yield jumping, accelerating that sell-off, putting pressure on debt markets everywhere. And then, look, I'm also looking at demand for safe havens. Those are surging, sending gold and silver to record highs as sentiment is definitely deteriorating. Now, here in Davos, speaking earlier, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, was adamant that the Greenland issue would not escalate and dismissed the idea that Europe could possibly dump U.S. treasuries.
This is a false narrative that there is no talk in European governments. This was a report written by Deutsche Bank that this could happen. The media has latched onto this. I think it is a completely false narrative. It defies any logic, and I could not disagree more strongly on that.
All right, that was Treasury Secretary Bessent. Just a couple of meters from here, with me now, Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group, and Chad Thomas, Bloomberg's executive editor for Europe. So thank you both for joining us. Ian, we just heard the Treasury Secretary. I don't know whether he's trying to walk down some of the antagonizing things that Trump is saying. Is there a way out of Greenland?
If Bessent were president, I think that he'd be building a lot of confidence with the Europeans with that statement. But when he says it's a false narrative, does that mean when President Trump announces that there are tariffs that are going to hit these European countries on February 1st, which is like a week from now, that was a false narrative? I mean, look, I do know that Marco Rubio has been working assiduously to try to find a way to square the circle on Greenland. Is there a 100-year lease, for example, for Denmark? Is there a way that the Americans would have veto authority over some of what Greenland defense measures, security measures would be, but they wouldn't actually get ownership, which is the Danish red line and the European red line. But the point is that Trump has accepted none of those things. Right. And ultimately, the American people did not vote for Bessent. They didn't vote for Rubio.
Chad, I don't understand what the red line is for Europeans, because they're talking tough, but there's nothing to back it up. So what could they actually do?
Well, that is the real question here. Will the Europeans back up some of the tough language that they have been using with real action? Of course, they could do something when it comes to counter tariffs. They have that option. They could go even further with some of the tougher measures that they could implement at the European level. But so far, they haven't done anything other than talk. And in some cases, you had Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor, yesterday saying, wait a minute, let's be careful here. Germany, of course, very dependent on exports to the U.S.
They're not talking as one. Why not?
Well, they aren't one. Europe is not a state. The United States is. China is. When Donald Trump tried to get the Chinese to back down on tariffs, of course, the Chinese backed Trump right into a corner, and Trump had to negotiate. But he thinks that he can push the Europeans around, and so far he's right. Now, there has been talk of this anti-coercion instrument that many Europeans say that they will implement. Macron, in particular, the Italians have said, not yet, we want to talk. Starmer has said, not yet, we want to talk. Ursula von der Leyen is going to be addressing the forum shortly, and she has, in my view, neither the temperament, personally, nor the institutional capacity to hit the Americans back.
To Ian's point, we had a story just yesterday where we were speaking to many sources within the European Commission, within the European Union, saying they want von der Leyen to be more forceful, and that Europe needs to come up with a response, and so far they're not seeing that.
Yeah, but so my thinking is, why, is it because they're afraid that this escalates and then we go to actually a war?
No.
Or do they try and see whether if they play the long game, Trump will just forget and get onto something else?
It's mostly because they aren't dealing from the same set of interests. I mean, the Nordic countries believe this is urgent and that this could break NATO, and I think there are some Europeans that support them on that. The Baltics do, the Poles do. I think that France does, but ultimately the Italians don't, and a lot of other Europeans do not.
But why? Because they think they can speak to Trump? Because actually the Prime Minister Meloni has a good relationship with
also
him.
Because in part it doesn't matter that much to them individually. I think that is a big part of the issue here. National security does not mean the same thing when you talk to all of these different European leaders.
Well, I think when you say, who has a line into Trump, Alexander Stubb, the Finnish president, thought he had a line into Trump and was speaking to him regularly. They're one of the ones who got slapped with these tariffs now because they have been backing Denmark. So who really has a line into him?
What's going to happen here is that the Europeans are ultimately going to see that they're divided. That this should be the one issue. It should be the crisis they want, because Americans do not support Trump on Greenland by a large majority. Right. Americans do ultimately have a sense of fairness, and they understand that the Americans are treating the Danes as a bully, that they are, this is purely for Trump's ego. It's not a national security matter that could be resolved by the Danes very easily. He has refused to negotiate with the Danes on that issue. Trump says we've been working for 20 years. This wasn't an issue for Trump. When he was president for 4 years, he had the opportunity to move it. So the question is, what do you do when the interests of the United States president actually diverge from the interests of the United States? Well, and that is a real issue on Greenland.
Ian, do Republican lawmakers, for the most part, are not happy about this? Do they step in? I mean, there's still a Congress.
There is a congressional delegation that is here. It is a bipartisan congressional delegation. There were several Republicans I spoke with yesterday morning. They clearly are not happy. They were in Denmark showing their support for one of America's most steadfast allies, fighting side by side and dying just the same number per capita in Afghanistan as the Americans did. But for President Trump, that does not matter. It does not matter. And if you are European, you feel like the United States is treating you with utter contempt. Right. They're treating you worse than they're treating the Chinese, worse than they're treating the Russians. Why would they do that? And the answer is because they can. So unless the Europeans decide that they're going to show that there will be consequences for President Trump directly for treating them with contempt, he will continue to.
Consequences are messy, but we're talking about possibly selling U.S. Treasuries from pension funds. I mean, is that feasible? Is there any appetite for that?
There is some conversations we hear going on among some of the pension funds, like do they divest from U.S. assets over this, in particular in Denmark, but whether they really do that or not, that certainly remains to be seen. We had Bessent saying this morning that he believes that's a false narrative. I've also been thinking about the fallout in the Nordic countries. They have been so pro-American, not just from a political point of view, but culturally as well. That's absolutely changing now. You look at the protests that have been taking place across Denmark last weekend. That's unheard of.
Permanent damage is being done to the United States and its relationships with its friends around the world. Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, has just come to Davos, returning from a trip to Beijing, where he has developed a strategic partnership that will bring Chinese automobiles into Canada. Why? Because they no longer feel they can trust their supply chain with American automotive manufacturer. Why are they going to be working with Chinese tech firms to a greater degree? Because they had done America's bidding on Huawei. It got them in trouble, and now they feel like they can't trust the Americans. This is America's closest ally. You think the Europeans aren't going to respond?
You see something happening similar in Germany with the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He had initially wanted to take a very tough stand with China. He's now planning to go to China. They just announced new incentives for automobiles. They're going to allow Chinese cars in as part of that. So it's happening in many countries.
But it was interesting for Canada that actually President Trump wasn't against that too much. I think he gave it almost like a blessing in disguise.
I understand why they're doing it.
Right.
That's right.
But do they buy defense from China? I mean, there's
not
buying,
defense,
but there's buying a little bit. But you actually need the real stuff.
But the Canadians are going to be stepping up their defense purchasing, and over time they're going to do a lot more to actually integrate with the Europeans as opposed to the United States. Right. The long-term implication of the U.S. will continue to be the most important trading partner for Canada. The U.S. will, on the other hand, be doing less with Canada than it used to. And when they build that infrastructure out, that is permanent. That's change.
Will the U.S. get Greenland?
Get Greenland? I think the answer is no, but I think the question is how much damage is going to be done to the relationship before that becomes evident. And right now, we're in an escalation mode. Is Trump going to use Davos to back down, or does he need to actually see that this plays out more badly for him over time?
I mean, he did last year at the NATO summit. Actually, it went off much better than many people had expected. So could he show up in Davos, to Ian's point, and actually negotiate with people? Possibly. It depends on which Trump shows up.
But now he's also he's going after the UK for something, with one of the islands.
For giving up the Chagos Islands. He already said he supported it. That's right.
Right.
So, well, he changes
what's
his mind.
Mindset?
Well, ask Marjorie Taylor Greene. I hate to bring her up, but the fact is that, he had one position on the Epstein files and she supported it. Then he changed his mind. And MAGA is whatever Trump says MAGA is at the moment, right? It is not an ideological consistency. It is you must be loyal to Trump. And if Trump changes his mind, as he does, you support what he has changed his mind to.
Where are the Republicans in this?
I would say that the Republicans continue to publicly support Trump on virtually every issue. And that is likely to continue to be true until the Democrats take the House in the midterms or until there is a major crisis. And either of those things can happen, in the future.
And the Democrats?
The Democrats still are leaderless, and they still are very unpopular. But there's no question that at this point they see that the midterm elections are going to be mostly about the incumbent, and in that regard they feel better about taking some momentum.
I want to ask you about Japan in a second, but do we know who President Trump is meeting whilst he's here?
We don't know for sure. He said, of course, this morning that he wants to have a number of meetings with people over Greenland. We believe he'll meet with Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. Of course, we haven't been talking about Ukraine, and actually, Stubb, the Finnish president, was saying this is what we should be talking about while we're here, not Greenland, but what's going to happen with Ukraine. But that has really been pushed off the agenda for many people.
Good news for Putin.
This is good news for Putin.
Of course it is. Yeah.
But he's also invited him on the Gaza Peace Board. So again, unclear what that relationship looks like.
Also unclear the Gaza Peace Board is the Gaza Peace Board. If you read the charter, it sounds like it's something that Trump is intending to be, sort of his group of leaders that are going to talk about international issues more broadly, but apparently not with Macron.
Could I just a question, what does Trump want? Does he want to win? Does he want to see that or show the world that he's won on everything?
Well, he has said that the Donroe Doctrine is all about, sort of the backyard will be a top priority. Venezuela was a big win. That clearly empowered him. Yeah. But at home, what he wants is very clear. He wants an end of checks and balances on the executive. And that means both complete loyalty within his administration. Yeah. It means complete loyalty within the administrative state. And it also means doing everything possible to make the judiciary less independent and more aligned with him.
Your take on Japan, there's big market moves. I'm not going to ask you to talk about the markets, but when you look at the Prime Minister, she was doing very well in the polls. She called an election. Could this backfire?
Well, it could backfire, but she called an election because her party, the Liberal Democratic Party, is underwater in the polls, and her approval ratings are around 70%.
Right.
And I don't think that a sudden spike in bond yields is going to suddenly take away the fact that she is really considered much more independent. She's outside of all these political clans in the LDP, all of whom had come from leaders and leaders and leaders in their families. She's a complete outsider. She's the first female prime minister. She's talking tough on Taiwan. She wants to focus on growth. And she just started. So ultimately, calling for near-term elections was the right move for her, even though there's possibility that's a risky move.
So this market volatility, voters will look through it.
Japanese voters? I think Japanese voters are supporting her at this point, yes.
Okay, thank you both for joining us. Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group, and Chad Thomas, Bloomberg's executive editor for Europe. Well, that's certainly interesting to get us started. Coming up, inflation in Nigeria eases, coming down from a high of more than 30%. We'll discuss the outlook for rate cuts with Nigeria's finance minister. That's next, and this is Bloomberg.
This week, live from the Alpine Mountains of Switzerland, is the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos. Bloomberg Television brings you unmatched coverage and conversations with world leaders, business executives, and billionaires as they navigate responsible AI deployment, economic expansion, and geopolitical tensions. Tune in for daily coverage all week. Context changes everything.
back to the Pulse, everyone, live from Davos. Now, there are signs that fiscal reforms in Nigeria are taking effect, with price rises slowing, revenue beginning to improve, inflation hitting around 30% in 2024, leading to deadly protests as food prices rocketed. Well, with us now, Wale Edun, Nigeria's finance minister. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. I have many, many questions on Nigeria, but it's very clear that there is one show in town. It's the Trump administration, what to do with Greenland, with tariffs, and some of the threats that we've heard from them. Do you worry about the effect this has on the world economy, including your economy?
Certainly, because with trade, normally countries like Nigeria, emerging markets, can expect to benefit from growing trade, which will lead to increased output. So in a situation where the world is fragmenting, where there's a move back from multilateralism and from world trade at the global level, a move back from globalization, we worry that that will lead to less trade, less growth, and of course less opportunity for countries such as ours, and less investment, and that at the end of the day leads to a society in which you have less growth.
I mean, do you worry about an imperialist America also when it comes to oil facilities and things like that, or should we not worry about, not be too alarmist and just try and stay the course?
We try to be positive and look at it that as a country that has resources, that has critical minerals, maybe we'll be asked to do a transaction that will be mutually beneficial. That's the way we look at it.
Minister, talk to me a little bit about your government borrowings plan for this year, considering the wider budget deficit projected for 2026.
Yes, on paper we have a wider budget deficit because we've got the approval of the National Assembly of Nigeria, the Parliament of Nigeria, but actually the commitment of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu under his renewed hope agenda at the stage we've got to now, after removing major distortions, after stabilizing the economy, is to consolidate and in fact to rely less on debt and to try and drive investment. We're here in Davos to tell the Nigerian story and to show how investable Nigeria is now that we have a stable macroeconomic environment.
Are you planning any further Eurobond issuance? Or other issuances?
We have the latitude to do it, but as you know, if you want to go to the market, first of all, the market has to be receptive. Yeah. You yourself have to be within your guidelines and your rules and regulations for borrowing, your margins for borrowing, and of course, the timing has to be right. So we'll see down the road what will happen in that area.
But could we expect something big on Eurobonds this year, or is the appetite not there?
We're hoping to rely less on borrowing, but we'll see what happens there. We have the latitude to come to the market. We were very well received the last time we went to the market, but honestly, our emphasis is on investment and particularly driving domestic investment, increasing domestic savings for investment in the Nigerian economy in order to grow it.
Minister, Nigeria's debt-to-revenue ratio remains amongst the world's highest, actually, the world's worst, despite recent reforms. So what is the government doing to correct that?
Well, that's the point. The issue is now to focus on revenue, focus on domestic resource mobilization. As you know, we have a tax reform regime that is coming into place, 4 tax acts that, apart from being pro-poor, are meant to help increase the tax-to-GDP ratio from quite a low 13% now to drive it up to about 18% in the nearest future. In addition, we have automation, application of technology to drive internal revenue of government, block leakages and loopholes, which a manual system has engendered. And as I say, in addition, we are looking to bring in private sector funding. The private sector is 90% of the GDP, and we want, under the regime that we have now, under the improved incentives that we have now, that Nigerians consume less and save more and invest, as well as the diaspora Nigerians and indeed foreign investors. We're looking to places like the Middle East and other areas that are cash rich and looking for good investments.
Minister, how much time does that give you, actually? I don't know whether there's a threshold of debt where you think you might need assistance from the IMF.
Well, we're hoping that what we are putting in place is immediate. We are in major discussions with foreign direct investors. We have just signed a CEPA, a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with UAE, and we're hoping that this effort allows us to bridge that gap and to bring things into balance fiscally, such that we can rely on our own resources more than the multilateral institutions, who, as you know, are always there. But we are in an environment where multilateralism as a whole is receding. So we're looking to rely on our own resources, including the regional market of ECOWAS and the continental market of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
And you're confident that this will happen?
We are optimistic and we are determined, and we'll give it our best shot. And as you say, we need to get better fiscal balance quickly, and that is our aim.
Minister, going back to the IMF, is there a threshold? Is there a number in your head in debt to revenue that actually you start being very nervous?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. The idea is just to be making sure that we bring the figure down from where it is now.
Yeah. Is there anything that the fund, the IMF, wanted you to do that you've resisted so far?
I think when we're in discussions with our trusted partners, the IMF, the World Bank, what they look at what President Bola Ahmed and Tinubu has managed to do in 2.5 years. Nobody would not reasonably put that down as a condition. So he has gone so far, he has done so much to correct the distortions of the past and to bring back investor confidence. If you look at the reserves, you look at the inflation rate, if you look at the stable exchange rate, you can see. And if you look at the growth in the first half of 2023, 2-point-something%. Now 4. In the first half of 2025, 4.23%. So that is a trajectory which we look to maintain, and we know that would take us to the kind of growth that will lift millions of Nigerians out of poverty by creating jobs for them.
Okay. Minister, I want to ask you about under the new regime, what do you see the tax to GDP ratio being?
Well, the aim in the short term is to get it up to 18% of GDP, and of course to get government spending, the amount of money that government has available to put into social service and infrastructure, way over 20%.
What are you most looking forward to in Davos? I know, again, a lot of people are anxious. I don't know whether you meet with some of the Trump administration, there's a big delegation from the U.S., or whether you're focusing on other parts of the world.
I think that anxiety is created by uncertainty. There's less predictability about the world order. There's less predictability about the import regime that one will be faced with. And so that is natural. But we are here optimistically telling a story of credible macroeconomic reform, which we intend to maintain the course. And of course, we're here to talk to investors, to show them and to convince them that Nigeria is investable. We have a large domestic market. We have the resources, natural resources, and we have an improved investment environment. We have critical minerals. We are able to do a deal.
Yeah, have you approached the U.S. about possibly doing a deal? Or are there any discussions going on that?
We are approaching the world, and you must also remember that in terms of value added, we now have 650,000 barrels a day that were normally being exported crude, raw, and that are now being refined into petroleum products as well as into other petrochemical products, so that we are back on that road to industrialization. That is what we have to offer.
Minister, it's very clear that last year the economy managed actually with the tariffs and trade uncertainty, largely because a lot of countries did not retaliate. Could 2026 be different?
Well, we are there to find out, and we are hopeful that there will be a pullback from fragmentation, and that there will be more predictability, more certainty, and more multilateralism.
Okay, well, Mr. Minister Wale Edun, thank you so much. That was, of course, a Nigerian finance minister with a tone of optimism for the future, despite all of the uncertainty out there. Coming up, we discuss what the trade uncertainty means for pharma and the level of M&A we could see this year with Belén Garijo, the chief executive of Merck. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to The Pulse, everyone. We're live from Davos. Now, President Trump has hit out at the French leader, Emmanuel Macron, for rejecting his invitation to join a proposed board of peace for Gaza, suggesting he could impose a 200% tariff on champagne. France, Germany and the UK have all responded to President Trump's threat of new tariffs on European nations over their support for Greenland. Well, Brendan Murray, who leads Bloomberg's trade coverage, joins us now. Brendan, how are the markets reacting? And if imposed, what could they mean for Europe's economies?
Yeah, exactly. So the markets don't like the fact that we could be headed back to a transatlantic trade war. France has been one of the strongest countries to come out against the latest tariff threat from President Trump, saying that the European Union should use its strongest weapons to retaliate. We heard Treasury Secretary Bessent this morning say he didn't specify Europe, but he said what's in your best interest is to not retaliate and to just go along with the trade deal that the U.S. has negotiated with you. Well, the Europeans are looking at that and saying, yeah, fine, we didn't retaliate last time, but all it's getting us is more tariffs. So we're at this situation where neither side wants to make the next move, and it's in neither side's best interest to get into a trade war in a relationship that's among the biggest trading relationships in the world.
What options, Brendan, are available for Europe right now?
Well, they have a list of about $100 billion worth of American goods that they could slap tariffs on. They also have this anti-coercion instrument that they could deploy against U.S. companies, digital services companies, tech companies. That's really sort of the bazooka that they'd only bring out as a last resort. It seems that they're trying to give diplomacy one last chance, and we'll see it play out in Davos over the next few days, where President Trump wants to meet with some of these leaders and try to hammer out some sort of path forward with Greenland in particular, but with the U.S.-European relationship more broadly.
Brendan, thanks so much. Brendan Murray, who leads Bloomberg's trade coverage there. Now, despite the tariff and trade uncertainty, Germany's Merck has been working to revive growth across its three main divisions: healthcare, life science and electronics, through acquisitions and stricter cost controls. A company which capitalized on the pandemic by supplying COVID tests, therapies and vaccines is now seeking to build out its drug pipeline in an attempt to diversify. Well, joining us now is Belén Garijo, chief executive of Germany's Merck. Thank you for joining us. There's quite a lot going on right now in Davos. We thought we were going to have a conversation on AI, but certainly trade tariffs and threats are back on the agenda. We'll get on to Merck in a second, but how are you living through this? There's so much anxiousness out there. What stance should the Europeans take?
I think at this time, the only thing we can do is to really continue to anticipate what is coming towards us. And we have been extremely active in the last few years, preparing for different scenarios, in particular the trade restrictions through our region-to-region approach. So we feel we are very well prepared. As you know, we are a company, a very resilient company, and we are confident that being very focused on the U.S., having our biggest percentage of our workforce as a very extensive manufacturing footprint, we will be able to collaborate with the U.S. administration and contribute to their goals.
What's your thinking on the U.S. international reference pricing approach? Are they too aggressive?
Look, you know, first of all, I have to say that looking for affordability of medicines is very legitimate, you know, and patients need to access innovation And that is really the magic, affordability and rewarding innovation. This is what we advocate for. So we are collaborating with the U.S. administration to be able to find the right balance. We recently signed an agreement to supply our fertility franchise and give better access to patients in the U.S. that would love to have a family the chance to receive IVF at an affordable price, and we will continue to speak to the U.S. administration to basically take the letter of intent to a formal agreement.
Would Merck ever consider limiting launches in lower price markets, or do you see other solutions?
So,
would you ever consider actually not launching if the price is too low in certain markets?
Look, our mission as a company is to provide innovation to patients. So the only thing that we take into consideration is to provide innovation to the markets in which we operate, and we will continue to do so.
You've repeatedly said that Merck is looking for a potentially deal, maybe a big deal in life sciences, but that valuations have been too high. Is that changing a little bit?
You see, we have seen the life science markets being very volatile in recent years, and of course, the market cap of the companies have oscillated up and down. Prices are more moderate.
Okay.
Nevertheless, the seller's expectation continues to be very high. So we are really driving our organic portfolio.
Right.
We are super strong in process solutions. We have great momentum, and we are not in a hurry. It will come when we believe it's the right time, at the right price for the right target.
But is it mainly about price, so that you've identified areas or the companies, but it's the price?
No, it's not. It's not about price. It's for many years our M&A strategy was aiming to build a scale. Now we have a leadership position in life science, and we want to look for those companies which are going to fill innovation gaps and will give us a sustainable innovation model to the future.
I know parts of your life science units appear to be stabilizing after a difficult destocking period. There's also a big wave of anti-vaccines in the U.S. Could that impact actually some of the uptake?
We have really put the overstocking that we have seen post-COVID, mainly related to the supply chain disruption during the COVID times. We have put it behind. Definitely we see, as I mentioned already, very, very strong momentum in order intake, which is growing double-digit quarter after quarter. As we have communicated recently, our book-to-bill is very healthy. All the leading indicators are moving in the right direction. We are very confident.
What are you most optimistic about this year?
Look, we continue to focus on our 3 pillars of growth. So semiconductors, driven by the booming of AI. We are at the center of capturing that opportunity. Our recent acquisition of SpringWorks is giving us a fantastic chance to grow our presence in rare diseases, and now we are already accelerating the launch in the US, but also initiating the launches in Europe with very promising data in Germany, in the early times in Germany, and of course process solutions. I mentioned already. We are really excited with the momentum we gained in that market.
Life sciences, but again, actually, you're invested in sectors that are changing, that there's quite a lot of disruption. Is it faster? Is this disruption faster than you ever thought it would be?
Look, we play in very highly attractive end markets, and disruption and change is part of our business. The main topic at Davos this year is going to be geopolitics and AI once again. And of course, this is asking for us as leaders shaping the companies to be able to deal with those disruptions, and this is exactly what we have been doing in the last 5 to 10 years.
What do you see as the biggest challenge for Merck in its next phase of growth?
Our next phase of growth is very, very well anchored in our 3 growth pillars, and obviously the challenge, the constant challenge that we will have to deal with is improving our R&D productivity to be able to bring innovation to customer and patients.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. That was Belén Garijo, the chief executive of Germany's Merck. Now, beyond trade and geopolitics, AI also a big part of the Davos agenda and one of the core themes. Earlier, we spoke to Lila Ibrahim, the chief operating officer at Google DeepMind.
We've been really focused on continuing to make Gemini a really powerful model, bringing in capabilities that we think can unlock human potential. And code was one of the areas that we really focused on in the past year, and really pleased with the progress we've seen with Gemini 3, which was announced at the end of last year.
So what's next for Gemini? Are you hiring more people to work on it?
Oh, and we're always looking at our talent. And so on Gemini specifically, we're continuing to think about what are the capabilities that will continue to increase the making it valuable for users. So things like, how do we continue to make it more factual? How do we help with things like reasoning, concepts, memory? We really believe that we can have a personal assistant, but in order to do so, there are a lot of areas that we need to work on, such as privacy, as well as how do you make sure that you have memory. So the AI understands me and my preferences and my needs, and I can use it as a tool as part of my everyday work. And what that requires is really understanding more of kind of the world model, the context around us in our daily lives.
Lila, is there anything that you've put on the back burner because of your big focus on Gemini?
Well, an organization like DeepMind, I think one of the extraordinary things is that we have been able to keep the breadth of portfolio. So when you look at last year, not only did we have Gemini and VO, progress in our video generation, audio, imagery, but also things like Weather Next 2, being able to predict weather forecasts, like 50 different paths of a hurricane for the next 15 days, which really, if you think about it, can really help with emergency preparedness. We've also made significant progress in some of our materials discovery to help with superconductors to power supercomputers, or next generation batteries to help with electric vehicles. We've continued to advance work in Synth ID, our watermarking technology, ancient text to help us understand the past. I think there's so much exciting work that's happening.
Lila Ibrahim there, the chief operating officer of Google DeepMind, speaking to me a little bit earlier. Now, coming up, we discuss drug pricing under the Trump administration and the outlook for pharma with Narasimhan, the chief executive of Novartis. That's next, and this is Bloomberg. Welcome back to The Pulse, everyone, live from Davos. Now let's take you live to the UK Parliament, where Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, is making an address to mark the 250th anniversary of the United States. That's after President Trump criticized the UK Prime Minister for his plans to return sovereignty to Diego Garcia, an island that houses a crucial military base to Mauritius. So this is important. Let's take a listen.
Well, and Lady Catherine graciously hosted for us. It was not lost on me that there at my table were items of silverware older than my country. Puts it in perspective. But this year in particular, we remember just how far we really have come, how our nations have evolved and grown and strengthened in so many ways together. America's founders embarked on what was a radical experiment, of course, a government of, by, and for the people, ruled by laws and based on the self-evident truth that all men are created equal and free. That experiment transformed 13 disparate, distant colonies from the world's largest empire into what became the world's freest and most successful self-government in human history. For Americans, this year is not simply a celebration, it is an invitation to come together and to ask what we are doing in our own time to preserve and fortify that experiment and all of the blessings of liberty and opportunity and security that we enjoy today, and frankly, sometimes too often take for granted. We have a stewardship obligation to maintain these blessings, and all of us in the West, all of us together, are facing real challenges today that we must acknowledge and confront, and we do that best together. Across the pond, Congress and the Trump administration have been working very hard. We're trying to usher in a new golden age for our country, as we say. We're marshaling every resource we have to make America safer and stronger and more prosperous than ever before. And I'm very bullish on the prospects of doing that. We must do this because we know those hostile to the West and to our shared values are engaging in increasingly sophisticated forms of subversion and espionage. We see China, Russia, and Iran grow more aggressive and emboldened as they intensify their efforts to exert economic, political, and military influence around the world. We see a callous disregard for basic human rights, new provocations, and even the theft of intellectual property on a scale like we have never seen before. Clearly, President Trump is taking seriously the modern and dynamic threats that China and Russia pose to our global security, especially in focus the last few days as it relates to the Arctic. And while we can have thoughtful debate about, among our friends about how best to counter these threats, we all certainly agree they must be countered. We ignore these threats at our peril. And I want to hasten to express our gratitude to the UK and to all of you for joining us in some of our most recent actions to deter these hostile regimes, including the recent seizure of a black market vessel seeking to circumvent oil sanctions. That was a big help to us. That kind of open dialogue and partnership is a great example of how we can work together to ensure our collective defense around the world. It is an objective and obvious truth that a strong America is good for the entire world, and a strong UK is as well. At the same time, it's also obvious that we have to take care of our own houses, so to speak, before we take care of the neighborhood. And let's be honest, among friends here, in both of our nations, there is a need today to fortify our houses against internal challenges as well. In the West, if we make an honest assessment, we must acknowledge that our long-term prosperity and security are currently being undermined by, let's call it a crisis of self-doubt. It's been developing now for years. Elite institutions today tell the young and impressionable that our story is one of oppression and hypocrisy and failure. Our brightest minds are too often taught to view our history only through the lens of its sins. And we see the work of international organizations and transnational bodies hinder the very spirit of creativity and industriousness and daring that our nations were built upon. We have faced this in America just as you have here. A truly menacing skepticism towards history and our national institutions. And it's even come to the point where even great heroes like Sir Winston Churchill are questioned for their legacy. What has taken hold is a mindset that defines itself not by what it loves and seeks to preserve, but instead by what it condemns and seeks to tear down. And this growing disaffection we see, particularly among our younger citizens, is a serious threat to the health of both our nations. If the next generation is never exposed to the deeper wisdom of the Western world, or the enduring tradition of the British Parliament, or the genius of America's model of Republican self-government, then why would they feel any obligation to defend or preserve them? Fortunately, history teaches us an important lesson. Just over half a century after American...
Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, making an address in the UK Parliament at a time, of course, of heightened tensions over security issues, including Greenland, and Diego Garcia. Novartis, one of the big pharmaceutical firms to agree a deal with the White House on drug pricing to bring them in line with other countries. Now, the company will also be keeping a close eye on the trade and tariff situation as President Trump, again, ramps up threats. Now, let's discuss all of this with the Chief Executive of Novartis, Vas Narasimhan. Thank you, Vas, for joining us. Look, there's a lot going on. We were just hearing from the House Speaker. We heard from Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, trying to urge calm amid this growing transatlantic rift. But are things going to get worse? You were kind of also at some point with, other companies in the firing line. I don't know how we should be taking this.
What we've tried to do, Francine, is, really future-proof our business. We made these $23 billion investment commitment, and we've been making progress on that. And what that allows us to do is already progress almost completely to making our medicines in the U.S. for the U.S. So even if there are shifts in the tariff landscape, we feel like we can weather that. There'll be no impact on our guidance or our outlook, so we feel very good about that. And I think, importantly, part of the agreements that we struck as well should exempt us from these tariffs, though, of course, that also is always an open question inflation.
And Vaz, this is basically, the so-called most favored nation. What does this agreement mean in concrete terms for your portfolio, but also investment strategy going forward?
I think probably the biggest impact is going to be on future launches. I mean, there are other elements to the agreement, but I would say those are smaller. But the commitment now we've made to the U.S. government is that our prices in the U.S. will not be below the net price we have in the second lowest price in 8 countries, 8 benchmark countries. And what that in effect means is we cannot launch in those 8 countries unless the prices are comparable. Be delayed launches, might be no launches. And I think this is a real wake-up call for those markets, which are primarily in Europe, but also Japan and Canada, that they need to better value innovation if they want these medicines to come, and then future investments in R&D and manufacturing. This is a pretty seismic shift in the structure of our industry.
I mean, you've called for a lot of governments, including Switzerland, but also, some others in Europe, France, to step up their support for life sciences. What does the industry need right now?
Look, when you look at investment in innovative medicine spend as a percent of GDP per capita, Europe is about half of the U.S., but it's a closable gap. When you look at the kind of investments these countries make in subsidies of other industries, non-high-tech, high-innovative industries, if you want to attract industries like ours, properly value our medicines, properly value the impact they have on patients. If you can do that, then of course we'll keep investing. But I think it's a wake-up call, and what I worry, Francine, is it's going to take this to become a crisis, multiple medicines not launching across the industry, patients not getting the medicines they need, and then we're going to have the response only then.
Yeah, you also, I think, cut 550 jobs from a factory in Switzerland. Is this an early warning sign of things that could come?
Yeah, I think that was more of a normal, workforce realignment, but I think that the bigger topic will be when you think about future investment, rather than expanding plants in Europe, we've now put up sites in the U.S. We have sites in China. I think the bigger issue is now we're having really a balkanization, so to speak, of the global manufacturing network. And so if Europe wants to attract investment, it has to step up. It can't rely on the U.S. Market for building out European factories.
Why is it so hard for Europe to do things differently? I don't know whether it's competition, it's growth. We had the Draghi report. What's the problem?
Look, I think European governments have multiple challenges. The fiscal challenge of trying to respond from a military standpoint, from an energy standpoint. But I also think there's a lot of holding on to old industries and old subsidies. And I think as long as you want to spend your money subsidizing, things like farming, like, other sectors that maybe aren't as high tech and high innovation as ours, that's a choice. And I think now that choice is really in front of leaders. If they want high tech industries, they're going to have to invest, reward innovation, and then you really attract the investment going forward.
Are you looking to buy anything this year?
Look, last year we were the #1 company in terms of deal making in the sector. We were very active. Most notably, our proposed acquisition of Avidity Biosciences for $12 billion. We'll continue to be active this year as well. When we think about growing a company of our scale, getting to be now over $60 billion of sales, aspiring to get to $70 or $80 billion of sales in the next decade, we need external innovation to complement our internal innovation engine. So absolutely, we'll be active in the deal making world.
I mean, do you have a treasure trove? How much do you have to spend? And how are valuations?
Well, I mean, from a finance standpoint, we're in a very good position. Strong free cash flow, low debt burden. So we're in a position where we're not capital constrained. It's more, I think, the science, and does the science support, what we want to do. I think valuations have rebounded now in the biotech sector. So I think there is no more of the opportunity to buy the dip, so to speak. But that's okay. I mean, we're more driven by, is this an innovation that could really drive long-term value creation?
But this is not your first Davos. I know I've seen you here many times. It feels different. It's your 9th Davos, and every year we say this is a turning point. This is the critical year for world affairs. I mean, does this year feel different because of the Trump administration being here and talking tough?
I mean, it does feel different in so much as a lot of the action is happening here. Like we're kind of in the middle of it. We're in the middle of all of it, all these different topics. So in that sense, it's very, very exciting. But I think it's also important to just keep the long view. I mean, if I think about an industry like ours, we have 10-year innovation cycles. That's 2.5 U.S. presidencies. So I keep telling our people we need to adapt to these near-term realities, but we can't lose sight of the long-run approach that our company needs to do to win.
Is there a danger that people, including CEOs, are moving too fast or thinking too short-term?
I think there's a danger right now because you can get very reactive in this moment. I think you have to just take a deep breath, see how things play out. You don't want to constrain your company or constrain your future opportunities by acting too quickly. Even when you think about these MFN agreements, we tried to take months to engineer engineer an agreement we thought we could manage for 10 years, not just trying to win for 3 months.
You've been in charge of Novartis for 10 years.
9th year.
9 years. I mean, what are your personal goals?
Look, right now, I've been super proud. As you know, we were at #2 in shareholder return over the last 3 years, strong innovation pipeline. Really, for me now, is how do I set up the company for the next decade, 2030 to 2040, and how do we get all the right innovation and medicines in-house? But it's a great position to be in because it's much more about thinking about the future of medicine and how do we really realize that in our company.
Vas, thank you so much for joining us. Vas Narasimhan there, the Novartis chief executive. Coming up tomorrow on The Pulse, we speak to Philip Hildebrand, the BlackRock vice chair, the Prime Minister of Qatar, chief executive of Commerzbank and the Bank of Israel governor. We'll have plenty more, of course, here from Davos, and what we're looking for is to try and understand whether there's an escalation between the US and the EU, or whether what the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, will try and slow down tempers a little bit. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, don't miss our conversations with Filippo Gori, the co-head of global banking at JP Morgan. Up next, Bloomberg Brief.